Hello, everyone, and welcome to the WARC podcast. Rica Facundo here, managing editor at WARC APAC. At WARC, we've been exploring what building enduring and effective brands looks like today, especially when there's a lot of pressure to deliver impact and respond to trends immediately. Joining me today is Mim Haysom, Executive General Manager of Brand and Customer Experience at the Suncorp Group, an Australian insurance brand. She's giving us a behind-the-scenes look of their multi-year journey to develop their resilient brand platform, which is proving to not only be good for the business, but for society too. Welcome, Mim.
Hi, Rica. Thanks for having me.
So recently you launched this really exciting tool called Haven that empowers Australians to make their homes more resilient in response to severe weather events that are leaving millions of Australians at risk. And I think a lot of people can relate to this all over the world. But can you take us a step back? But tell us more about the business impetus behind this tool and the larger resilience platform it was based on.
Yes, well, we've been on the journey of really leaning into and focusing on resilience as a strategic priority for about 6 years now. And so it was really back in 2019, we could see the impacts of the increasing frequency and severity of weather events in Australia. And what brands, insurance brands, particularly in Australia, tend to do is focus on what happens after an event, which is really important. It's how you turn up for the customer and support them after they've been impacted by something that in a lot of instances can be quite traumatic. But all of the focus from an investment and a marketing perspective has been really in that after the event process and time frame. And we saw a real opportunity to start thinking about how could we actually help our customers be better prepared for the impact of the weather events that are no doubt in some areas going to impact them. So we made a decision to really flip our strategy and put the industry norm on its head and flip from talking about recovery to talking about resilience.
I love that you said that you had to make a decision. That's one of the hardest things to do, especially when you're changing category norms. Can you talk us how you managed to take that leap, maybe the mindsets or the silos or the behaviors that you need to cultivate so that brands can, change the narrative, change the category, especially when dealing with issues like this?
Well, for us, our purpose as an organisation is building futures and protecting what matters. So it wasn't a task for me as the CMO at the time to get the organisation to rethink itself or rethink its purpose. What we actually did was lean into the purpose and connect the purpose in a really meaningful way to customer outcomes. And so it didn't feel like it was a complete revolution in a way. It was how do we lean into and deliver our purpose in a more meaningful way to our customers. And I think once you have something really powerful around that purpose, it's a lot easier to galvanize the entire organisation and to get people to collaborate to the outcomes that you're looking for, as opposed to, as the way you put it, operating in silos. I reflect on the journey that we've been on for 6 years, and we now have prevention is, one of our key strategic pillars in our 3-year business plan for the entire organisation. So it's not something that was a moment in time. It's something that really was born from, yes, a marketing insight, but the whole organisation is very committed to resilience and prevention as a strategic pillar now.
I love what you said. It's not revolution, right? It's evolution in a way. How do you make those incremental steps to that is rooted in what the brand stands for, what people in the organization are familiar with? And I feel like that takes a lot of the perceived risk, I suppose, because it feels like you're doing it in the right direction. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, well, it doesn't feel tactical or at odds with either the brand or the organisation's purpose. So if the idea and the strategy comes from an organisation's DNA and purpose, it's very easy to then take that and roll it out through the business and execute on it. So for me, it's about authenticity.
And you mentioned it was a 6-year journey, and the Haven tool is the recent expression of that. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the Haven tool is building on the success and the equity and the performance that you've developed in the years before?
Yeah, sure. So we started with a project called One House, where we partnered with James Cook University, the CSIRO, which is a scientific organisation in Australia, and an architect. And we designed and built a prototype of a house that would be more resilient to bushfires, floods and cyclones. And so that was phase one, if you'd like to call it that, of our resilience journey. And the intention there was really to identify and learn how we could help our customers make their homes more resilient. And so that took us a couple of years, and we had some great learnings and scientific findings and design elements that we uncovered that could actually be used in everyday homes. And so the second step for us was post One House and sharing those learnings and democratizing that IP. We actually wanted to take those learnings to existing homes and to real customers and show them how they could modify their existing homes with those resilience features, if you like. And so that was the second part of the campaign, where we actually found a house up in Rockhampton, which is an area that is impacted quite frequently by weather. And we took 5 homes on one street and modified them with these resilience features, and we renamed the street Resilience Road. So that was great to really show that this wasn't just theoretical, that you could actually take the learnings in real life and push them through into an existing home. So that was phase 2 of the campaign. And now Haven is phase 3, if you like. And that was really born from looking at the research and saying, yes, the work we've done has elevated the resilience conversation and awareness with our customers of the need to start thinking about how they make their homes more resilient. But there are 2.7 million homes in Australia that are at risk of being impacted by a weather event quite significantly. So that's not individuals, that's homes. So 2.7 million homes. So it's quite a large number. But only 35% of Australians think that they could ever be impacted by a weather event. And an example of this, more recently is in Queensland with ex-tropical cyclone Alfred. That cyclone made landfall, far, far further south in that state than it was anticipated or people would expect. And so Aussies are pretty laid back. They kind of think, she'll be right, this won't happen to me. But 30% of them are like, I'm never going to get impacted by a weather event. But 2.7 million homes are at risk. And so with Haven, we saw a real opportunity to make it personal and to get people to really have a tool or a utility, provide them with a tool or a utility that they could use to give them a very personalised view of the risks that they could possibly be at risk for. And so that's where the idea for Haven came from, is we wanted to make it personal and we wanted to put something in the hands of our customers to help them understand what their risks were and how to mitigate against those risks.
No, that's fantastic. I think really the way that you describe that is, you start from the business need and how you then over the last 6 years, how you've changed the category, how you've personalized that, the problem, which we know is very difficult for, climate change and sustainability to consumers themselves. And the thing I always hear from brands who are taking a multi-year journey is, consistency is key, right? It's how you kind of connect those different experiences, touch points. Like you took the learnings from phase 1 and you brought it to, phase 2. Can you tell me about your thoughts about consistency, what you've learned about connecting the dots and making sure that everything that you've built before kind of reinforces or gives a new inspiration to what you can do next?
Well, it's hard to do, but it's so incredibly powerful when you get it right. And that's what this work, I think, brings to life really beautifully. As you said, we got the kind of theoretical learnings from phase 1. We took them into the real world in phase 2, and then in phase 3 we're using technology to really enable every single Australian to get personal with that kind of information themselves. So our task and our objective is always to keep building on what we've done. Resilience is our strategic platform, and it's always about how do we keep it fresh? How do we deliver something new to customers in the context of resilience? So for us, that consistency has been really critical to the success of the campaign, and everything we've done has been a build on what came before. But as I said, it's not easy to do. And, I chat to lots of CMOs, and I'm sure you'll be chatting to lots of them this week in Cannes. And a lot of the challenge for marketers today is the pressure of short-termism and, having to turn the dial really fast on business results and sales results, and having those really long-term strategic conversations can be challenging when and if you're facing into that kind of business environment. And so it's not easy. It's really hard, but I hope some of the work that we've done provides case studies that other marketers can use to take to their own organisations as well, to say, here is the benefit of making sure that we are also thinking about long-term consistency and longer-term brand and customer outcomes, because when you take that approach, it can be so incredibly powerful. And the longer-term impact is so much more significant than if you did lots of little independent different things along the way.
I love that. And that it's another area that WARC is really looking at. And I think at Cannes, you spoke about how in an industry obsessed with moving fast, actually, you need to move slower, right? By slower, i.e., you need to be a bit more strategic. But let's talk about what that means in terms of reporting, the results, right? What does long-term brand building really look like when, we are operating in a very fast environment? Like, what I've heard from people I've spoken to is like, can't wait 2 years for, the results of brand building. So what are your thoughts on that? What does reporting, quote unquote, long-term brand building look like in today's context?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think about it through the lens of brand, absolutely, but also business results. And as much as the work that we've been doing has been born from a long-term strategy, when we take these campaigns to market, we see an immediate impact. So Haven, for example, it's 3 years old. We've already had 100,000 people come to the website to explore that work. We've had 25,000 customers go through the entire experience in 3 weeks. So, and this is only live in Queensland, although any Australian can use it in terms of the marketing campaign around it. So those results are pretty significant. So we're already seeing brand engagement through customers. We're already seeing a lot of media engagement. There's been a lot of media pickup and interest around resilience. So all of those things have an immediate impact. And it also has a pretty immediate impact on consideration of a brand when customers are shopping in the market, when they can see that you're delivering intrinsic value to their journey. So as much as we talk about what is the long-term impact of the strategy on market share, which has been positive, on NPS, which has been positive, on awareness, on consideration, tick. We also see an almost immediate uplift as soon as that campaign activity goes into market, even though it's a brand play, not an offer or a retail tactic. So I think there's a real obsession in our industry of trying to delineate short and long, and I don't think it's that cut and dry.
I would totally agree with you. I mean, at WARC, we're testing how, brand boosts performance, not just in, the future, but like right now. And that's true, in Australia. That's true in, markets that I operate in, such as Southeast Asia, India, China. It's true in the US. But let's talk a little bit about like semantics, right? Because I started talking about the brand platform. But, we're in advertising, we think in campaigns. And sometimes you have, brand building campaign means I need to, only measure that with long-term, brand metrics. But as we've talked about, like it's integrated, right? You can't silo that. So do you think we need to move towards a more platform approach to how we deliver, our marketing strategies? Or should we remove campaign from that's quite provocative, but I don't know. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I don't think there's a single answer for that. Yeah. I think it depends on what's your business objective, what's your business challenge that you're trying to solve for, and what's the customer problem you're trying to solve or customer opportunity you're trying to realize. I don't think you can answer that in one way. For us, we've had success with this campaign platform, if you want to call it that we've lent into, or the strategy, I call it. Because we've lent into that for 5 years. The reason why it's worked is because we've kept it fresh and we've made sure that we've moved it along so it's always relevant and delivering value for customers. And so I think sometimes when people think about long-term strategy or long-term creative platform, they think it's got to stay the same. It's not about, it's about consistency, not sameness. And the consistency is in the underlying value you're providing the customer, but you've got to keep that fresh and keep it relevant because the world is moving faster than ever before. And I think when you're thinking about the metrics of the campaign, even with Haven, this is our third iteration of this strategy, and the metrics and the dashboard we've built to look at it on a weekly basis is completely different to how we thought about One House 5 years ago. And so I don't think there's a single answer to that question. I think you've got to really understand what you're trying to deliver for your brand, your business, and your customer, and build your metrics around that. And that's where you should have started with the brief in the first place anyway.
That is what you should start, but hopefully more people can do that. But I love what you said. It's consistency and not sameness. And I want to understand a little bit more about the universe that you've built around this platform. And we've spoke about Haven, which is that tool. But what are the other touch points that you have around this platform? How are you building that consistency, like you talked about, to kind of cumulatively reinforce that message for your customers?
Yes. So Haven is one part of a much bigger organisational movement around prevention. We call it prevention and resilience. So Haven is, this current iteration of marketing-led initiative. So there is an advertising campaign that sits around it. So, all of the traditional kind of, advertising campaign work, there's TV, there's out of home, there's lots of digital, there's lots of content. We're using influencers to talk about the utility, and then there's the utility itself. There's other amazing things that are happening within our organisation. We've built what we call a disaster management centre, which is in our headquarters in Queensland. It's a 9-metre long screen that brings together geospatial data, real estate data, drone mapping, risk profiling, weather tracking from the BOM, Bureau of Meteorology. And we use that disaster management centre to understand where and when weather is going to impact our customers. It enables us to send messages to our customers in advance to help them prepare. It enables us to work with partners like the state emergency services once the weather's landed, to tell them where the most impacted streets are. We can go down to address level with that technology. So there's a lot that happens in our organisation. Another example is our mobile disaster hubs. We've built 5 custom-built mobile hubs that we can deploy. They're almost like a caravan, but they're specced up with Wi-Fi, with a whole lot of capabilities where we can drive into an impacted area and be there on the ground for our customers, literally straight after the weather event. And that's really important for our customers because simple things like they've got nowhere to charge a phone. When your house has been flooded and you're completely displaced, you can't even have a cup of tea and charge a phone. And so we've built these mobile hubs where there's a Suncorp person there who can help you navigate how to make your claim. If you need temporary accommodation, we help organise that for you. They're there. Our team's amazing. They're there to give you a hug and a cup of tea. And actually, they're the things that matter when people have been displaced and are going through trauma like that. So the whole organisation is rallying around and innovating in incredible ways. It's not just Haven. Haven is probably just getting talked a lot about here because it's a marketing initiative and it's very visible to this marketing community. But the work that's happening all through Suncorp to support customers with prevention and resilience is really profound. It's a huge focus for the whole organisation.
I love that. All the examples that you gave are not your usual touch points, I think, but they're all working together to reinforce, the same message. And again, goes back to the point of making sure that you rally around the organization and what you're trying to do for your customers.
I think that's the strength of the idea coming from the purpose at the very outset, because it's so authentic that it doesn't end up being a marketing initiative. The whole organisation is galvanised behind it, and you have teams all over the place in different functions thinking about working together to solve these challenges for customers in really innovative, different ways. So it's really, really powerful when it starts with the purpose.
Last few questions for me. Like I mentioned, it's been 6 years since you started this journey. Looking back, were there any moments that taught you the most, even if they didn't go as planned? For example, were there any bets you made earlier on? Maybe you would approach a little bit differently now.
Oh gosh, there's so many.
Pick the one that first
Uh,
comes to you.
Well, I think right back at the beginning, when we were producing One House and COVID hit, and there was so many challenges as a result with the production of that. And it took us so much longer than we thought it would because of some of those challenges. And there were logistical curveballs everywhere. And I think the reason it survived is because the entire collective team was so passionate and believed in it so much. And when I say collective team, that's the Suncorp team, that's the Leo team. It was also the team at the CSIRO and James Cook University who was so invested in helping us make this happen. It was the collaboration was absolutely critical to make it work. And having the trust in each other and the confidence in the idea to do things differently, you are literally innovating. And so you're in the unknown. And having the right partners on board to make that happen and to push through some of those challenges, for me, that's the biggest learning. You cannot get to big, complex work that is a long-term platform that's 6 years old if you're chopping and changing partners all the time, if you're unclear on your strategy, if you're unclear on your role in the organisation. So I think I think relationships, partnerships, and collaboration in a really productive way are the things that I've really learnt about through the process.
And then last question. I mean, you've alluded to it throughout the entire conversation, but how would you describe your philosophy on effectiveness then? And how do you embed that within the organization? If you can give that one advice to anyone who's listening.
So my team would tell you that I am obsessed with objectives. So if a brief, comes to me that doesn't have really clear objectives and measurable metrics and metrics that matter, then I reject the brief. Like my question would be, why are we doing this work? And so I think you've got to be really, really clear on what you're trying to achieve for the brand, for the organisation, for the customer, and you've got to hold yourself relentlessly to those metrics. Yeah, that's my view on effectiveness. If you don't know what you're trying to affect, if you're not clear on that, then you're not going to be effective.
I really love that. That is such a tangible answer to, philosophy is such a profound question, but I really appreciate that. So to anyone listening, make sure you know your objectives and deliver that consistently across, multiple years. And on that note, thank you, Mim, for your time. And thank you to our listeners for listening. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe to the WARC podcast or visit warc.com to read all our content about effectiveness. Until next time.